Hey, everybody, welcome to our Tuesday virtual roundtable with the Idea Network. We are so glad to see each and every one of you. We're going to have a great conversation today with Dustin Gaines. Dustin Gaines is a good friend of mine. I'll explain the connection in just a moment, but before we do, welcome. Today, we're gonna have a good time. But before we go any further, I'm gonna throw it to Kylie, and then I'm gonna throw it to one of you to open in prayer. But throw it to Kylie for a few announcements, upcoming events, some ideas. Hey, we've got a lot of stuff coming up soon, don't we, Kylie? I mean, we are only 6 months away from Idea Night at this point.
Yes, it's crazy to think about, but yeah, Idea Night's coming up. I know Caleb Yoder and Corey Knopf are working hard on that even as we speak, just finalizing some things with some of the speakers and host as well, which a lot of you are often host of the Idea Night. So if you're wanting to do that, go ahead and let Corey know. I'm sure he's probably already even reached out to you. But mark your calendars, September 6th, September 19th, 2023, coming up before we know it.
Hey, Kylie, I know we don't want to spoil anything right now. We can't do it. It'd be unfair to our partners, Jeremy and Jason and everybody else. But we have already begun to negotiate with and call in our certain speakers for Idea Night. And I mean, some of the people that are agreeing to be a participant in this, I mean, it's a whole new level, don't you think?
Yes, some things are still in the works, so I don't want to over
Oh, I'm not saying nothing.
under deliver. Still in the works, but we've got some relationships going, and it could be very, very cool.
Yeah, we're
Even
excited
the ones
about
who are already confirmed, it's very, very cool.
One of the great things that'll happen at our Idea Night is what happens at every Idea Night. And that is, I want to encourage each and every one of you guys to even now begin praying about local community leaders within your own local context, within 100-mile radius. And I mean, think through it, yes, but literally get on your knees. I'll be doing this myself for the Las Vegas Valley. Get on your knees and begin praying and saying, God, who is it in this community that needs a friend? Who is it that needs somebody to reach out to them? Who is it that I can help and encourage? And it's going to surprise you. It does every single time. It's going to surprise you that God's like, why don't you reach out to that guy? And I'll reach out to him and I'll be like, hey, man, this is Josh over at Southern Hills. Want to grab a coffee sometime? And I'll begin the relationship in preparation for Idea Night. And why? Because I don't know who is right now going to really struggle throughout their entire year. Maybe they're really struggling with some sort of an emotional problem or relationship problem. And my intentionality is to connect with them so that I can bring them to Idea Night and say, look, we've got a community of pastors that are here for you, and we want you to know that we love you. And so oftentimes we think of the megachurch pastor across town as the guy we need to bring. The fact is, there's some pastor, some community, some ministry leader. Thomas says Donald Trump. No, not Donald Trump. Thomas, he's a community leader, but is Mar-a-Lago that close to you? Really? Well, I don't know. We'll talk offline. But somebody, I mean, sure, bring Don if he wants to come. But make the Idea Night special by including ministry leaders that need encouragement, love, help, support, and friendship. That's what I would encourage.
Also, I just put Corey's number down in the chat. His email is also engagement@ideanetwork.church if you want to reach out to him. But one thing I did want to mention to you all that's totally public knowledge is so after every Idea Night and really every event, we reach out to you, all the delegates, and we ask, what's your feedback? What did you think? What should we change? Give us ideas. While we're Idea Network, we love ideas. And a lot of the feedback over the years has just been pricing and mentioning that it's maybe awkward or inconvenient to invite a friend who's not associated with the network and then ask them to pay a certain amount. And so we have brought the price down to $9.99. We wanted it to be cheaper than going to a movie, and hoping that this will really make it much more feasible for a lot of ministry leaders to be able to come one day. And one day we'll make this happen, but I would love to make it free in the future. we would have to have some strategic partnerships in place in order to make that happen. And even to make this price happen, we were working on some strategic partnerships. So we're just going ahead and out of faith saying, okay, $9.99. That's what we need to make it. And then praying that God will provide some sponsors or some strategic partners that will allow us to make up the difference and kind of subsidize in that way. So we heard you and we're listening to your feedback. And I hope that that pricing really makes a big difference for your community.
It's a great way to do it too, in the sense that, like, if I wanted to host an idea night and I'm a pastor in the middle of, Michigan, and I'm like, okay, I want to do this and I want to invite 15 guys, but I don't want to ask 15 guys to pay $30 a person to come. I mean, that's awkward and weird, but my church itself could budget aside $150, and I'm paying for those 15 guys to come. And it allows for the network to be able to put on the event, and it allows for each of the local churches to do it. Now, obviously they can pay for themselves, but we want to make this as affordable as possible. We also were finding out that there were some of you guys who are hosting an event and you are paying $30 per registration. It's costing you $500 to put on an idea night. And that's not the goal. That's not what we're wanting. And so we're excited about where Idea Night is going and the potential of what this September event has. If you as members have any feedback, thoughts, more ideas, we want to hear from you. We change and adjust the future of the network based upon those that are most invested in the network speaking into our lives. And I was just having this conversation with James Kephart, who's on the phone right now with us this morning, and telling him, James, we want to hear more from you. And I can say that across the board with our members. We want to hear more from you. And you reach out to myself, Jeremy, Kylie, Jason, anybody in the team. And we want to hear more from you guys on these things. Well, Kylie, any other thoughts or announcements before we go to prayer?
That's all for now. That's all for now.
All right. Let's go ahead and go to Mike Spann. Mike, it was so good to be able to spend some time with you at the summit. It was great to see you. Would you go ahead and open us up in a word of prayer and ask God to bless this time together?
Absolutely. Heavenly Father, we are so grateful and thankful for your goodness and your mercy. And just thank you for, Lord, a group of guys that are like-minded, that have a heart for you, a heart for others. And I pray that today's meeting, Lord, would be encouraging and uplifting and challenging. And Lord, may help us see some areas that maybe we need to shore up or just be proactive to be protective of the ministries you've given us to steward. So I pray you bless this time with your presence and your power. We ask you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, Mike. And thank you, Dustin Gaines, for being here today. Dustin's going to introduce himself and his law firm. That's right. I said it, law firm. He's a lawyer. We've already heard Josh Hirschberger make all the Christian lawyer jokes that we need. I'm not sure that Dustin needs to make fun of Christian lawyers, but he is one. And he, along with Josh Hirschberger, are two of my closest friends who happen to serve Jesus and serve in the law realm of law. Thankful for him. Now, what he does is a little bit different than what Josh does. He's going to explain about his firm and how his firm can help your local church, but specifically help you. And he was expressing to me in a conversation just yesterday about one of the biggest problems that he has seen is problems within staff within local church settings. So he's going to have to explain a little bit more what church law is all about, and how a church can have a staff culture free of harassment and abuse. And as many of you are senior leaders in the room, you're obviously going to want to make sure that your culture has that. So without any further ado, let me introduce Dustin Gaines. Hey, Dustin, welcome to the roundtable today.
All right. Thank you, Josh. I'm so glad to be here today and looking forward to talking with you guys. As Josh mentioned, my name is Dustin Gaines. I've been married to my wife, Shannon, we just celebrated our 20th wedding anniversary. We live right outside of Dallas, Texas. If you've ever flown into the DFW airport, we're about 8 minutes from DFW. We live in a part of town called Flower Mound. I can be from my house to sitting at the gate in under 20 minutes. And it's a perfect opportunity for that, just to be able to get out and all of those things. We go to a great church here in the area called South Lake Baptist. I serve on the elder board there at the church. And then my wife and I, we lead marriage ministry. And we work with couples that it's marriage enrichment, marriage trouble, any of those types of things. And we get to work in that. And full time, as far as my vocation, God has called me to be a lawyer for churches. I worked in full-time ministry before I went to law school, and worked at a church in Ohio, and then just been at it ever since. And our law firm is a brand new law firm. There were four of us that were partners at our previous firm, and the three of us, we just launched our brand new firm just a few weeks ago. And you can find us online, and I threw my contact info in the chat there, but it's mychurchlawfirm.com. And then I put my email address there as well, and then my cell phone as well. But our firm, we're completely dedicated to helping churches with just about any legal need that you might have. So we're very complimentary of one another. You know, doctors have different practice areas, lawyers do too. And we look at ourselves as, if you say, hey, our church is merging with a different law firm. We've got Stephen Goodspeed in our office who's done over 100 church mergers throughout his career. If you say, I've got a problem with the IRS, Mark Juba in our office, he'll represent and do a great job defending and helping you through the IRS process. If you ever get sued, or you have to do a major investigation, or you're involved in a crisis, then I'm the person to work on that particular piece. Or if it's in the labor and employment realm and context, I'm your person to talk to there as well. And that's all we do day in, day out. We've entered appearances in courts and in cases all across the country, both state court cases and federal. And it's an honor to be able to stand up and to be able to help churches and to be able to help pastors. One of the things that we're going to talk about today, but I'm sure you guys have seen the different podcasts and different news stories and different things that have come out. And there has been in our country just a spotlight that's been shined on abusive cultures within the ministry staff context. So you've probably seen the Mars Hill podcast. You're listening to those. You've heard of other ones. You know, anytime you really look at Christianity Today, you're going to find and different ones. You have all the bloggers. You know, all of those things. And one of the things that I've really noticed happening within the actual just the church law practitioner area, and again, all we do is church law. And within this space, I mean, it's been absolutely stunning to me in the last 2 years, the number one lawsuit that has been coming up. And it's been at a clip of about one new case per week that I've had come in. And it doesn't matter. It's pretty indiscriminate. If you're a small church, if you're a mega church, wherever you're at in that spectrum, it's been labor and employment cases. And before I went to law school and really started practicing in this, I thought, well, man, what's a labor and employment case? I mean, I know if somebody slips and falls, you know, in the parking lot, then they are going to find a lawyer and, you know, write a demand letter. But in the labor and employment case space, it's going to be a discrimination claim. It's going to be a harassment claim. It's going to be a retaliation claim. And they're going to put you through the legal ringer through the process. And it's a little bit frustrating. I know we don't have time to go into all the nuances. There is a very strong First Amendment defense that applies to churches. Your case, if the right person is involved, if the person that is bringing the case, if they performed any sort of a ministerial function, we're going to be able to get that case thrown out. But on average, you're not eligible to get it thrown out until about a year after the thing has started. And it takes a lot of time. You have to go through discovery in a court case. You have to go through a motion to dismiss hearing. You have to go through the Equal Employment Opportunity EEOC process before that. You have to pay a lawyer to file your EEOC papers. And it's just this huge distraction. So we've made it just a passion project of ours here at the firm, since these are coming up so much, to be as proactive in educating churches. And all of these things, they start with a culture on the staff team that is healthy. And we're going to look at just a few things from the HR perspective that you can put in, and you can help create a culture that's healthy and good. And then, of course, at the end, if there's any Q&A or anything like that, even if it's not related to this, but it's your chance to, hey, I get to stump the lawyer, that would be great. I love just any questions that are on any topic that we can be able to work through. But first thing we wanted to talk about is just, what does your HR documentation look like in your ministry? I know that, you know, churches of all sizes, it takes a little bit of time for a church to get to the place where you have a dedicated, you know, person on the team that oversees HR. and that looks at those types of things. So today I just wanted to go through kind of a checklist, and then you have my contact information. We can provide resources. We can provide, all of those things to be able to help get you shored up. And on the First Amendment things, I have an article that I've written. I can send you that as well. And just send an email, send a text, give me a call. You've got all the contact information there for all of that stuff. So first place that I would say is make sure you have a good employee handbook for your ministry. And one of the most important things that your employee handbook is going to do in the blog era that we're in today is it's going to send a loud and clear message that you do not tolerate harassment or abuse at all on the staff and in the church level. So that means within your handbook, you need to have a good anti-harassment policy that's there. So what are some examples of bad anti-harassment policies that I've seen? So bad anti-harassment policies are handbooks that don't have any policies at all, or they're ones that make you go and have the employee be involved in some sort of an awkward confrontation with the person. There needs to be a set policy that's in place. So if an employee, if you have a part-time person or a full-time person that's having a problem with a different staff member, if that staff member is even his or her supervisor, you want to have a different person and a different layer that they can go to. So they go to HR, they go to executive pastor, administrative pastor, senior pastor. They need to have somebody that they can safely talk to about whatever it is that's going on. So if you have that within your handbook, train your team through that. If you feel like that you're being harassed, and I'm going to talk about what constitutes harassment here in a second. If you feel like that you're being harassed, that you're being treated unfairly, that you're being treated in a way that would not glorify Christ, then this is who you talk to about it to be able to work through the situation. And they need to know that they have a safe place for it. Now, there's a huge difference between general conflict with people and then a workplace legal claim that could be brought up. And one of the best things that you can do is be able to encourage your people biblically how to work through and how to resolve conflict. And there's a path, Matthew 5, Jesus goes through a very comprehensive conflict resolution process. And through that process, you take the initiative, you go to the person. Matthew 18 talks about you go to them alone. You're able to do all of those things. And, you just have some time, even as a team. It's one of the most important things you can do is to just talk through conflict resolution. But one of the love being able to do is hopping in with the staff and just working through biblical conflict resolution. I live in conflict all the time. All I deal with are opposing lawyers, people that are mad at each other, people that want money, they want property, they feel like they were wronged. They're even more emotionally charged because church was involved in the process. So being able to biblically handle that at the beginning and understand, okay, there's one thing that's conflict that we can work through as grown human being believers, but then there are some things that are workplace harassment or discipline. So handbook is going to be a great starting place for that. After your handbook, you want to make sure your other HR documents are pretty well intact. Really important documents are job descriptions. If you don't have those, let us know. We can send you some templates on that. Your job description, it should just lay out who the person is, what their job is, what their expectations are. One of the biggest things that is important to put in a job description is if you have an employee that does not necessarily perform only pastoral functions. So you can think of things like a volunteer coordinator, person that works on your bookkeeping, graphic designer, security. They're paid people, not volunteers, but they're paid employees or contractors. And you're going through, but there's just a good description on there. Biggest piece of advice to protect you as a church for those people that don't perform straight up ministerial job functions, it's to give them one. And it's not one of those things where you say, all right, you're going to come to work for 40 hours a week as our security guard, and then you're going to volunteer in the children's ministry on the weekend. It's you're being paid 38 hours to be our security guard, but then we're paying you also to work with the kids on the weekend. And now they have ministerial function to their job, and that's legally significant in the sense that that's going to allow us to get the case dismissed as soon as we can. And if all your documents are intact, you have a job description that reflects that, you have a handbook that reflects that. When the opposing lawyer sends the demand letter over, you're going to be able to bury them, and you're going to call a lawyer and you're going to say, hey, we need defense. We got a demand letter from a different lawyer, and they're going to file an EEOC charge. I get those all the time. I gather all the documents and we educate them. I'd say north of 95% of plaintiffs' lawyers in the employment space have no idea about the First Amendment implications for churches and people that perform ministerial functions. So best thing you can do is you educate them gently, and sometimes not so gently at the very beginning, and you bury the other lawyer in all of the evidence that this person performed ministerial function. And yeah, you might want to go throughout your case, but they're going to get nothing, and you're going to be left with a whole bunch of legal fees on your side, Mr. Plaintiff's lawyer, for being able to not get anything. So employee handbook's important. Job descriptions are absolutely critical. And then a third one is just making sure that you have a really good and comprehensive performance evaluation system in your ministry. And that's significant for a lot of reasons. It's significant just for the iron on iron sharpening aspect of it, being able to go in, hear the blind spots, hear what they've done well, reward when appropriately, maybe make some transitions and different things as far as staff allocations and roles and all of those. But it's a structured time when you're also able to review them. If it's one of those gray area employees, like the graphic designer or security guard, you're able to review them on their ministerial function, which is absolutely critical. You go into the courtroom and now you say, Your Honor, or you just better even when the demand letter comes, you respond to opposing counsel. Hey, opposing counsel, ministerial exception, 2012 Hosanna Tabor case, 2020 Our Lady of Guadalupe case, both U.S. Supreme Court ministerial exception. It says that if there is a ministerially functioning employee, a court cannot interfere with the church's right to terminate them. That's a First Amendment free exercise and establishment clause violation. Court does not have jurisdiction. And Mr. Plaintiff's lawyer, you're not going to be able to get anything out of this. And by the way, here's all the evidence that shows ministerial function. This person was even reviewed on how they taught the kids or how they led the small group or whatever the creative idea that you came up with to be able to define and articulate what ministerial function means for that employee. So huge things to be able to have. I'd say the biggest three would be your job descriptions, your handbook, and then also just that annual review process. And it keeps a good open dialogue through everything. People are resolving their conflicts. If they understand what work-based claims are, most of them that are brought up don't even fit in the category of being a work-based claim, and we're able to get them dismissed that way. It's a preventative aspect to let everybody know that these things can be dropped out and removed. It will save you so much time, so much headache, and you'll have a staff culture where you're able to go and you're able to not have all of these war stories. I was at a church in Detroit, Michigan, and doing actual harassment prevention training. A big church, 20 different campuses all across. And after the training was done, I had 3 or 4 guys come up that worked on a church that was well known in the podcast era for all the stuff that happened. And these guys were just in tears. And they said, man, we were at a church for a while. We were, treated terribly. I mean, we were in staff meetings and we were made to swear. We were made to do things that were uncomfortable. We were made to miss events for our kids just to show our commitment. We were made to work all night just to show our commitment. We were never able to question decisions that were made in the right way. And it just completely burnt us out. And we're glad to be back at a place that has a culture that's healthy, where we can talk about things, we can ask questions, we can work through those things. And it was awesome to see these guys restored throughout that process. And they were just grateful for a church that was to talk through everything. Here's what harassment is. Here's what harassment is not. Here's what conflict is. Here's how to handle it. And here's how to make everything as good as you can. So those are just a few tips on the HR side. Wherever you're at, if you're about ready to launch or just launched, easy things, just give us a call. We can help you with some of the resources. If you're large, very well established, it's going to be a little bit different. Give us all, but we can get you going as well. And lots of things that are there. High risk area, #1 lawsuit in churches right now. We can take that risk down to just about nothing. We can cut it off internally, and then we can be prepared if something does come on the legal side to get it thrown out as soon as we can. So we'll go ahead and open it up for any questions that anybody might have. And there's even anything outside of what we've talked about here today. Be certainly glad to work through and answer any of those questions.
So I'm sure some have already done so, but if you haven't, check out mychurchlawfirm.com. I know that's what I was doing while you were talking, partly, Dustin, checking out the website and getting a little bit more familiar with it. And finding out that you can actually, like you said, you can book a free meeting, you can find out what it is to partner with you. And I'm going to ask more about what that might look like, an annual type of a partnership, membership type of a thing that a church may be interested in doing. But you asked, you mentioned specifically the concept of ministerial function. And we talked a little bit about this yesterday in preparation for today in a podcast we were doing yesterday. And so if I've got let's say somebody in our church and really they're just a secretary, that's what they do. They run my schedule. They just book appointments. And in the past, I would have said, okay, and you need to be at church on Sunday because you're a church member, and you need to volunteer for the nursery because all Christians should volunteer for ministry. You're saying, no. Don't say it's volunteer. Make part of her 40-hour-a-week job description to serve in the nursery for 2 hours on Sunday, because then you can qualify her job as a ministerial position, which would then protect the church if for whatever reason she had to leave, she was upset, she got fired, and then tried to sue us. Then we have a protection clause called ministerial function. Is that what you're describing? Have you seen this type of a case?
100%. And that's the case that comes in once a week right now. It's those. And, I mean, we've had them. It's really easy when it's a pastor or a worship leader. I mean, we squelch those out at the demand letter stage for the most part, unless you have an unreasonable plaintiff's lawyer. I've got one here on my desk right now. I mean, it's a $1 million demand, which is ludicrous, and we have replete, personnel records for this employee for ministerial functions. So we have to prove that they did something ministerial, because if a person is performing ministerially, a court cannot interfere with the church's right to terminate a minister. It's pretty awesome to look back at the case law all the way back to the late 1800s. It talks about how ministers are the lifeblood of the church. I mean, they're the visionaries. They're the people that are teaching and establishing, what they have believed that they're going to communicate is the doctrine that the church should follow. So a court can't say, I'm going to punish you, church, for terminating that person. It would just be contrary to all of the First Amendment case law. So in 2012, the circuits were all split prior to 2012. 2012, the Hosanna Tabor case came. And on that case, it actually used a private religious school. And the teacher that brought the lawsuit against the school, she sued for, I think, discrimination, disability discrimination, something like that. And the school said, hold on a minute, you can't sue us for this. There's the ministerial exception. You taught chapel a little bit, and you just were only involved a little bit in chapel. And they made the argument that, because you taught in chapel, that's a ministerial function. Court said you don't have to be licensed, you don't have to be ordained, you don't have any of those things. But because you taught chapel, that's inherently ministerial. And we don't have jurisdiction as a court to be able to hear this case, and they dismissed it. In 2020, two other private religious schools, same type of thing. One was old, one had cancer. They were fired, and one led music for hardly any time at all. And then one was involved in chapel again. And the court said, we don't have jurisdiction to hear it. So what we're saying is make it a part of every employee's job. And as long as they have a job where they meaningfully spend time performing ministerial functions, and that can be praying with people, counseling with people, leading a small group, working with kids. Working in childcare as a nursery worker wouldn't cut it, but if they teach the Bible, if they lead songs, if they teach memory verses, those are going to be things that are inherently ministerial now. So there is going to be that protection that's available. So what we're saying for everybody is, man, if a person works for a church, they can sign up to work anywhere. But as a church, churches are in the people business. Churches are life on life. Encouraging. Hebrews 10 talks about how we're supposed to provoke one another and be able to sharpen one another. And that's part of it. So everybody on the team is going to have some sort of a ministerial function in that regard. You can be creative. I know personality types are different. Some people would be mortified at the thought of having to get up and teach an adult class. Well, you can be creative, and you can find ministerial function for just about every personality type that's out there. and just make sure it's documented and all of those things. And then that's when you're going to get your protection, and you'll be able to avail yourself of what's called the ministerial exception, and it will be kicked out as quickly as you possibly can get it kicked out.
Now, when you're talking about documented, you mean literally making sure that that's part of somebody's job description. So even if their role is they clean the church, or their role is graphic design, and inside of the job description says, okay, you will also be ministering, and you'll be ministering in this way, this way, and this way. So it's documented there, but also it's documented, as you mentioned yesterday, in their quarterly reviews or their annual reviews. It's being brought up. Not only did you clean well, not only were you a good secretary, you also counseled so-and-so, and we're grateful for that. And you might be saying, well, that it seems like, I mean, isn't it a free country? I can hire who I want and fire who I want. And the answer is yes, it's also a free country. People can sue whoever they want. And so anybody that is dismissed from your ministry, or any individual who chooses of their own free volition to leave your ministry, can claim that they were either dismissed or they left your ministry on bad pretenses and sue you for doing so. And there is this ministerial exception clause that has been extremely helpful in many court cases that Dustin is bringing to us today. But Dustin, you didn't only talk about ministerial exemption clauses in this way. There were other aspects, and I'm sure there are other questions from the community, this virtual roundtable today, that some are wanting to jump and ask right now. So I'm going to go to the roundtable and see if there are any who would like to take the opportunity of getting free legal counsel in this virtual roundtable as we take advantage of Dustin Gaines at this time. It could be related to something that was already asked or talked, or it may be a question that you bring to the table and say, well, what about this scenario that I face right now? Who would like to jump in? Just raise your hand and we'll go to you. Mike Spann.
Some of you had a situation like Mississippi is a right to work state. I mean, that you can fire for whatever reason. Whether you have something like this or not, does that protect a church for something like that? Or is that still better?
That's a great question. So just about every state is right to hire, or at will employment, we call them. So it means you have the right to hire and fire for any reason, but labor and employment laws, you don't have the benefit like you do out on the roadway to see speed limit signs and those things. And it's federal law that applies. So every state, this is applicable. You can fire for whatever reason, so long as it's not discriminatory, retaliatory, or for harassment, those types of things. So discrimination, what is it? Well, you're discriminating against a protected class. So I'm going to fire you because, churches have more leeway in this. But, if somebody goes to work at Walmart, you can't say no female CEOs. You can't say, in the religious space, we have sincerely held religious beliefs that only male can occupy the office of pastor of a church. In the world, I mean, that would be crazy. I mean, that would be a great discrimination claim for somebody that worked at Target or Apple. But in the church space, we're able to freely and legally discriminate on bases of our religion. So we're going to have some exceptions and way more leeway that the First Amendment protects for us as churches. But when you get into I was fired because I have a disability, or I was fired because I was old, those are the type of discrimination cases. And even though the states are at will, you still can't fire for discriminatory purposes. The other one, and the number one claim really, is retaliation. And retaliation is so unknown. These are, every labor and employment case that comes up has just about a retaliation claim in it. So retaliation says that I engaged in some sort of protected activity, and there was an adverse employment decision that was made against me. And then the third thing the plaintiff has to prove is that there's a connection between those things. There's a causal nexus between them. So I engaged in protected activity. What is protected activity? It's crazy. I didn't know this until I got into working as an attorney. If somebody comes into your office, they say, hey, I'm paid hourly, or I'm paid on a salary, but I should be switched over to hourly. I don't fit within any of the Fair Labor Standards Act's exemptions to be an exempt employee. I'm miscategorized. Flip me over to the right category. And yeah, this person's a pain. How could you question anything? You're fired here. That's a good retaliation claim. I mean, if there was no First Amendment protection, I mean, that's going to really thrive in the court system because they engaged in protected activity under the FLSA. People can ask those questions in a protected way without fear of adverse employment consequences. And they're able to do that. And then if there is an adverse employment decision that's made, then that's retaliation and it has to go through the courts. If they have a ministerial function, you're never even going to get there because the court's just going to throw the thing out. So it offers that protection in a great way. And even though we have that protection, I mean, it's kind of like in Romans. I mean, remember when Paul said, shall we continue in sin that grace may abound? I mean, it talks about how, where sin is, grace is all the greater. And he says, God forbid, not going to do that. I'm going to respect the grace that God has given me, and I'm going to revere that great gift of salvation that God has had. It's not a license to sin, but I have a love now to be able to serve, and I'm motivated because of everything that God has given me. It's not a license. And it's the same thing here, even though there's in the church context, I mean, we can say, hey, we can have a lot more protections than a lot of other places would. It's in that spot where we say, we're going to still be able to do right. We're going to have a great culture. We're going to have a great staff. A healthy staff means a healthy church, healthy relationships, and those things. So even though at will, all that stuff could still come in big time if it's in the labor and employment space and there's a actionable claim that can be made.
Gotcha. And then one other question I'll let you go is, what about the church has a Christian school tied with it? Would this apply as well?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the awesome thing is the case law comes from schools on the Supreme Court level primarily. And I like that because you have church here absolutely protected. The farther away you get, the less protection you're going to have. So the Supreme Court cases landed on schools and school staff. And you just got to be creative. I mean, I've had cases where it's the director of accounting, and this guy, all he does is facilitate the funds. But then you really probe into it and you're like, all right, you're the director of accounting. What did you do for your job? Discovered through the process, he led a devotion every 2 weeks for his accounting team. So he had staff meetings with his staff. He prayed with them. He opened the scripture. He taught the Bible. And in federal court, able to go in and say, Your Honor, ministerial function. This guy, he taught the Bible to his team. That was a part of his job. He was supposed to do this. I had one with a volunteer coordinator. And you're able to go into court and you're able to say, First Peter, it talks about how we're a royal priesthood. God's taken the work of the ministry and placed it to the hand of every believer. Volunteer coordinator, it was an inherently pastoral ministerial function, judge, according to First Peter. And this person, that was their job, was to take your average member and place them serving with kids, working in small groups, greeter, usher, whatever it was. And those are all valid and viable ministerial functions that are there. So any personality type, even on the school side, you're able to make it to where a school teacher is going to be teaching the Bible, incorporate it and have in your job descriptions for your teachers. Every class that you teach is to be taught through the Christian worldview. Science is not science, it's Bible. Math, I mean, just include that within every job description. And then if I've even got a school case right now. One of the things that we're using as a defense is that when the principal would come in and observe the teacher, they had a rubric on the observation review rubric that's there. And one of them was, how well did the teacher incorporate biblical worldview? How was the teacher's devotion? Did the teacher pray like they were supposed to? And then that teacher even had to lead a song in class, and beautifully, all of that stuff was just right there on the review. And you're able to show ministerial function. The documents backed up the reality, and it made my job way easier to get that thing. And we're in the process of getting it dismissed right now. But saturate whatever employee is with ministerial function and just put it in the documents.
James.
I've got a question for you, Dustin.
Yes,
Has there been a job that you've seen in the church where ministerial function has not worked in the court case?
Yeah. So what happens is when you get an employment case, you've got your opportunity to get it dismissed on jurisdiction, and that's First Amendment ministerial function, and then you get to the merits of the case. So if you can get it dismissed on jurisdiction, you never have to get into the ugly nitty-gritty of everything. So if you have somebody that didn't perform a ministerial function at all, And I have had those, and they come into the receptionist is a big one, and security guard and lighting guy. So all the guy did was, and we tried to, there just was nothing. I mean, they had no leadership from the top. Hey, you're important and you're critical to the role and the atmosphere of worship in the church. You know, lighting is really important. I mean, we're going to go back to the Old Testament and we're going to look at the people that were involved in facilitating and leading worship. The church had none of that. It was just what are your technical requirements for operating a light, or what are you going to do as a security guard? You know, those types of things. So you're not able to make the jurisdictional arguments at all, and then you get right to merits. And so the plaintiffs in these cases, adverse employment decision, have to prove that I engaged in protected activity. And then the third thing, there's a connection. Once they do that, the burden shifts to the church. And in our defense, then we have to say, we didn't fire them for the retaliation or discrimination that they're claiming. We fired them because they were a deadbeat employee. They lied, they stole, they did inappropriate things, and we have for cause reasons. Once we establish the real reasons why we fired them, burden shifts back over to them, and then they have to prove that we were lying. And no church wants to be in this open public airing of grievances in court where anybody can go download the documents and they can see all the bad accusations, all of the text messages, all of the responses, and it's just this big ugly thing that gets there. So if we can do our best here to get it resolved, we never have to get into the mess of everything, which is really valuable too. So that's a great question.
Very good. Who's next? Who else would like to take advantage of the opportunity and further this conversation, questions about this conversation, or perhaps another question as it relates to church law that you may be looking at, you may be facing right now?
I've got a question real quick. You mentioned having the employee handbooks and things like that, the job descriptions, samples of those available. Our church, I'm the only staff member. We're a church plant in Pasadena, California. Some of these things I'm hearing you talk about, and I know I'm not going to remember all of this whenever the time comes for me to have some employees and things like that. Do you guys have this like in a book form or a PDF or something like that that I could reference when that time comes?
Yeah, email me and we can get you going with whatever documents you'll need. Absolutely.
Very good. Yeah, they're incredible. Dustin's firm is incredible with that sort of thing. It would be a great help. They've been a great help to our church. And my wife has joked with Dustin about being on retainer means she can call him anytime she wants and ask any question she wants, which is nice. Now, you might be wondering, like, what does that actually look like, a lawyer on retainer? There's a membership opportunity that Dustin's firm offers, and it's an opportunity that really is available for churches of all size. Dustin, can you speak to that? Am I using the right term, membership, or is it what exactly is that?
Yeah, it's just simple. We call it our annual membership program. It's a little bit different. I mean, our goal is we want to be able to have a relationship with you guys as you lead your church. So when something pops up, we want to be able to be there to help with it. So at all stages. So our membership, the normal price is $2,000 per year. And that gives you about an hour of attorney time each month, already prepaid and kind of there in the can, so to speak, so that you can call and you can work through. We do the $2,000 a year, or we also have a monthly option as well. If you just email in, we can provide all the details, but it's, just broken up into monthly payments on it. And you'll also get access to a client portal called Fidu is what it is. And in that, you're going to have, we do a monthly resource that goes out to everybody. We do a quarterly webinar on just whatever's happening in the law. All of that is in your Fidu portal that you're going to get. And it also is going to have just some basic documents and templates and resources for you. And the big thing is that since you're on that prepayment plan, and it's exactly the same if you go the monthly route versus the annual route. The monthly is a little bit more expensive just for the processing side, but not by much. And big thing is that we want to look at all your stuff. So we're going to take some time and we might spend your hour on month one, and we might look at your bylaws and your articles. And we're going to say, these are good. these need to be updated. These are really bad. Let's get them updated immediately. If it's going to go above and beyond the time period, then we'll tell you how much time that's going to take. And we might want to break it out over a month or two, just so that there's nothing additional that might be owed. Or you might say, forget about it. It's important. We just need to get it done right now. How much is it going to be? And let's just do it. And we can go that way. So we do governance, which is your articles and bylaws. We look at your employment stuff. We look at your child abuse prevention. We look at insurance. We look at your IP, intellectual property stuff. And we just make sure that you're just intact as a whole. And we take about the whole year to be able to go through those things. And you're going to get automated emails from us. Hey, you haven't used your monthly credit yet. Schedule a time. Here's who you need to talk to, and it'll have topics and it'll have the lawyers there that you can schedule the time with to be able to do it. But we really just are passionate about getting things shored up, like Pastor Mike said during his prayer, which was awesome. Getting things shored up and intact so that you can be able to just have confidence, not have to worry about this kind of stuff. You'll know your bylaws are good. You've had them checked out, they passed, and good to go. So you can just go ahead and be that way. And then if something bad does happen, you've got cell phone numbers of people. And again, I mean, we really work hard to obtain the highest certifications to be able to do everything we can. You'll have our cell phone numbers and you can call, and we can just be a resource to you. We believe the hope of the world is through the church, and God has called us to do specifically what we're doing, to be a support to you guys and to help you guys as you reach your communities. So that's why we're here.
Thank you, Dustin. This is one of the reasons why I wanted to introduce Dustin to the membership specifically, and to the broader community eventually, simply because I know Dustin. Dustin and I go back to our college days. We went to PCC together. And to me, a good attorney is going to be very much like a good mechanic. They all do the same thing, but in reality, if you can't trust them, you got a major problem on your hands. And Dustin is somebody you can trust. You get in trouble, something happens, you don't know what to do in a legal setting. You've got a deacon who says to you, we've got to call a lawyer. Don't call the guy with a billboard on the side of the road. That guy has no idea about church law. Call a church law guy. And if you say, I don't really know a church law guy, or the church law guy I'm aware of is like 92 years old. There's a guy here that really does work with our network and you can trust. And somebody I think that that should be in your Rolodex, if you still have a Rolodex, or should be in your cell phone somewhere. And this is that guy that can help in that world. Any last questions that we have for Dustin before we dismiss him for the day? Any last questions that we have here? We have 10 minutes, so it might be a question you're like, yeah, I really am dealing with this. I have a question and I want to ask that question. Plus 10 minutes of Dustin's time is, what is that, like $4,000 for a lawyer's time for 10 minutes? What is that? Is that about right? So we get to take advantage of it, right?
No.
I'm kidding.
No, not at all. And it can be anything. I mean, we do from crisis management. We help on the PR side, hey, we had this happen at camp this summer. What in the world do we do now? I mean, we had this accusation come in. What does our approach need to be to this? Who do we communicate to? What sequence do we communicate to people? Do we talk to the staff first, or the parents that were impacted? Do we announce it to the congregation? If we do announce it, what do we say? We help with all of that. So with whatever things that come up, just always know we're a friend and we'll be here in your corner to help.
So as you think through, if you have any final questions, let me reiterate in the chat, you've got not only mychurchlawfirm.com, you've also got Dustin's personal email address and Dustin's cell phone number. So you'll want to take note of this based on what might take place 2 weeks from now, or 2 months from now, or 2 years from now. Look it up on your phone. Don't text me and say, what was the name of the guy? I'm giving you the name of the guy right now. He's right there, and all of his information is right there. Any last questions before we jump off for the day? Yes, absolutely, Matt.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I don't think I heard this, but was there a specific link or whatever for that annual partnership with you guys? I don't remember hearing that.
Yeah, we don't have a link up yet. Our permanent website, we're about 3 weeks old. So there were 4 of us that were partners at the other firm, and 3 of us, we launched out so we could do more than what we were doing over there. So we just have the temp site up for right now. We're about a week away from the full site, but just email me and we can provide those details for you. But they will be on the full website in about a week.
So if you email directly, he can get that information.
Yep.
Good. Any other questions? Oh yeah, Adam.
So I'm in my first year, Dustin, and unfortunately last month we did have to let our secretary go. And in the process, we informed our deacons, and very much so with our deacons being spiritual leadership, their focus was on the spiritual side, but forgetting that there is a legal side doing things correctly. And they said we don't run things like a business. We don't do things and don't fire people like a business. I don't think I explained it very well to them in that meeting. I've had conversations since then. So just for future reference, maybe somebody else may deal with the same thing. How do we make sure that those in leadership understand that, yes, there's a spiritual side, but there's also a side that we have to look at as well from a business side?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a spiritual and biblical and moral obligation to care well for people, as you offboard and as you go through those processes. But, a church is subject to the laws that most other businesses are subject to. And the way that the law honors and reflects and or respects and appreciates church is the First Amendment defenses and carve outs that are available. So when you look through, a church is a business in the sense that you have banking and you have compliance rules and you have payroll and you have all of those things from that side. But you're also a ministry as well. So when you look at, there is the responsibility that while we are offboarding someone, we do have a responsibility to care really well for them. And, one thing that I didn't mention, there's going to be time when you think, man, we want to get rid of this person, email me before you fire some. A separation agreement might be the way to go, and you can provide some severance that's there. Never, ever, ever provide severance unless you have a separation agreement that's good, that goes. We can help with that. The second part of it is a great way to care well, but then the separation agreement, it really reflects being able to just be a good steward. We're in the United States of America today. We have a responsibility to be a steward. And part of being a steward is making sure that your T's are crossed and your I's are dotted on just the logistics and the business side of different things. So ministry side means caring well for people. Business side means that you're going to do things in a way that will allow. Your job is to protect the church. As the church leadership, you guys are the gatekeepers and the protectors of your church, and doing things right and going through the business side the correct way. You're going to be protecting the church and doing what you can so you can continue to reach people and do what you're doing. So there's definitely a balance in that, but you have to fulfill your business responsibilities, and you can do that while caring well too.
A quick follow-up as well, if I could.
Sure.
The pros and cons of NDAs, non-disclosure agreements. You got some people some pastors talk about how they always do them. You got some pastors that talk about, hey, don't do it. You need to be open to the church. But what are some pros and cons of NDAs?
Yeah, that's a great question too. It's going to be a case by case basis. If you have somebody that's going to go out there and they're going to defame you on Facebook and, really cause a lot of trouble and heartache, and some places are going to say, how dare you, your church, you should never have an NDA, to go through it. I've really worked hard on our separation agreement that we have to not make it scream that it's an NDA. And there's just one simple clause that's in it. It's that we as the church and you as the departed employee, we both mutually agree that we are not going to disparage one another. So we're not going to disparage you. You're not going to disparage us. You're going to keep the things that you learned that were confidential to the church. If you let somebody go that was in your bookkeeping department and they know giving amounts, there's not a pastor around that would say we don't want to have an NDA or a confidentiality clause for that. We don't want somebody to go and broadcast out what the giving amounts were for everybody. So it's just all on how it's worded. A secular lawyer is going to have, a big, thick NDA and it's going to look like you're trying to hide things and sweep things under the rug. Ours is a very careful pastoral balance of, we want to care well for you, even though it doesn't any longer work out for you to work here. And we also want to be able to protect the church on the business side as well. And I can tell you, there's been a ton of work in our separation agreement to get that to where we feel like that's pretty well balanced.
You mentioned not to ever give severance pay without a separation agreement. What is the reason for that?
Yeah, if you get a separation agreement, you have a waiver of claims. So you're paying them money that they haven't worked for. It's just a free gift. When you think of there's, tithes and offerings, when people give to the church, I mean, they're not giving so that an employee can get a windfall on the way out, but you do pay that money to them. It's separate consideration. It's different than their last wages that they earned. And you're giving them that money in exchange for some legal promises. One being, I'm not going to disparage the church. Second, I'm going to keep everything confidential. And then the big one is that I'm not going to sue you. If you don't give money and you just have the document, it's unenforceable. If you give the money without the document, you've given them money and they can still do all of those bad things. So it's not worth giving the money unless you get that protection right along with it. Does that make sense?
James, that makes sense? Yeah. We have to jump soon, guys, but I want to reiterate an aspect of Adam's question just by talking about pastoral care. We've had to dismiss people from our ministry through church discipline, regular members of the church, as well as staff and paid employees. There's a balance that has to be stated whenever you're talking to your deacons so that they do see a differentiation between how their last corporate job treated people versus how the church treats people. What I've been able to utilize is the terminology of, it's important for me to shepherd this person as best I possibly can as they depart from our ministry, but I also have a responsibility to shepherd the members that remain, and especially those members who are legally and financially responsible for the church, which include multiple, depending on how your church is set up, include multiple deacons. So yes, I want to shepherd this person properly as they depart, but I also want to make sure this person doesn't take away your children's home simply because you're a trustee of the church and are willing to dedicate your time and energy and focus. I can't guarantee that you as a deacon are walking with the Lord, but at least I can pastor you. I certainly can't guarantee that this person that's leaving is walking with the Lord. I don't even pastor them anymore. And they could make very foolish and hurtful decisions. So it's my responsibility to shepherd them, yes, but it's my responsibility to shepherd the rest of the flock as well. So I want to be protected just in case somebody chooses to follow a very, very ungodly path. And so that's allowed me to use legal terminology in a pastoral way that allows me to introduce men like Dustin to godly leaders within our local church. It also helps that I'm not talking to some rando lawyer on a billboard. Dustin's able to come in and say, let me talk to you about the marriage seminars that I lead in the Sunday school class I teach with my wife and my walk with God. And that's extremely beneficial when attempting to deal with a legal matter in a spiritual way. Good questions, guys.
And too, I mean, to that, I mean, our mantra as our law firm that you'll see on our full website is mind of a lawyer, but heart of a pastor. And that's really where all three of us are. I mean, we're balancing out the legal, and we're in a weird day with all the blogs and all of those, but still caring well and not just, wielding the legal sword, but also, as Josh mentioned, shepherding through the same time. And we're able to help you all find that balance related to each fact circumstance that pops up.
Dustin, it's greatly appreciated you joining us today. This has been a really fascinating conversation, and honestly, one that I saw was stalling to get going. And then now I feel like we could go another hour and have a conversation. So we'd love to have you back sometime to talk more as we prepare good questions as well to talk about legal situations that come up within local church settings and allow the members to get to know you more. If you are watching this on replay, I know there's about twice as many guys who are going to be watching this on replay later. If you need the information for Dustin Gaines, reach out at mychurchlawfirm.com. It's 12 noon in the Pacific Standard Time, and it is 3 p.m. on the East Coast. So it's time for us to say goodbye. God bless, guys. See you on Facebook.